We start this session, and we have already missed a few minutes. That's for our physical arrangements. The topic for this program is talking frankly, social and moral ills in our own backyard. Homosexuality, drugs, teenage pregnancy, etc. And alhamdulillah, today we have two very qualified speakers to speak on this topic. We have Dr. Hamid Al-Ghazali and we have Brother Edmund Arroyo. This session sheds light on our inability to isolate ourselves from the surrounding environment. And the good thing is that we shouldn't isolate ourselves from the surrounding environment because we are part of this society and we must handle our issues which are affecting the society. The community is not immune to the social and moral ills which we find ourselves in this society. Therefore, it is in our own interest to integrate our efforts with the efforts that aim to heal the many sources of mischief in our society and promote decency. Muslim Americans are an inseparable part of the American society. Our first speaker, Brother Edmund Arroyo, is a licensed social worker and licensed school social worker. He is a graduate of the University of Illinois at Chicago, Jane Addams School of Social Work, and Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois. He is the founder of the Heart Speak Institute, where the goal is to promote counseling and education to individuals, couples, and families in an environment that respect their individual and cultural dynamics. With experience in hospitals, public schools, and a child welfare agency, Brother Edmund has worked with clients on many types of individual, family, and social issues. He lives in the western suburb of Chicago with his wife and 2 children, and his topic today is how to face and deal with the moral and social ills in our Muslim community. Brother Edmund Arroyo.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. I feel like that's going to fall. It's kind of teetering there. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. So I'm going to start off by telling a little story of something that I hear quite often, parents in our community, when I start talking with them about the kinds of things they need to do for their children in American society to help them develop into the kind of people that the parents want them to be. And one of the things they'll say is, well, my parents didn't do that for me. I don't think that's important. They don't need to do that. We don't need to do that for them. We don't need to tell them we love them. That's just not what we do. We don't need to tell them how great they're doing. My parents didn't do that for me, and I turned out okay. One of the things I'll say to them is I'll say, okay, brother or sister, what do you do for a living? And when they say to me, let's say I'm an engineer, then I'll say, okay, say you came to the US and I'm your boss, and I tell you, okay, Muhammad, or Muslim may have not, but Muhammad, you have the job, but we're going to pay you $23,000 a year because that's how much you'd make in Egypt if you were there. You'd have a problem with that, and the reason why you'd have a problem with that is because your peers in the US are getting paid maybe $75,000 a year, $90,000 a year, and that's the only reason why you have a problem with that. If you were in Egypt and everybody else is getting paid $23,000 a year, or however much they make in Egypt, then you'd be okay with that. So I want you to think about that when it comes to your children, in that the way they perceive what they're getting from you as parents, and whether or not they're getting ripped off or the short end of the stick, is going to be based upon what they see their peers getting. And if they see their peers' parents spending lots of time with them, hugging them, telling them, and all these other things that a lot of children in America get, they're going to feel like they're not loved or they're not doing the right thing. And so some of these things, the reason why I tell that story is because some of these things that I'll mention today, you may think, well, yeah, I don't know, I don't think we need to do that. But I'm telling you that I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of teenagers, and it's probably in the thousands, and these are the things that I hear from them. And so when you look at that teenager of yours and they're arguing with you, there's a lot of things inside that they don't know how to articulate. And so a lot of times I'll see myself as a translator, or you're speaking different languages. I could say something to your child that you've said 50 times, but they haven't heard it because the language you speak is different. First of all, they've got certain filters up when you're talking. And then the other way around, I could say something that they maybe never heard before, but that's because you said it. So the first thing we need to do is educate ourselves as parents about these ills that are in our backyard. As we refer to the title, the immorality that's out there in the community. Now, this isn't just us that's having to deal with these things. This is also the non-Muslim community. I work full-time in a public school, one of the best in the state, yet these problems are all there. And your non-Muslim counterparts are struggling with these things with their teens as well. So one of the first things you can do is educate yourself on anything that you hear when it comes to, let's say, a new drug that you heard, or you could go. Nowadays with the internet, as parents, you have access to everything that your kids have access to. Also, we need to help Islam enter the heart of our children and not just their minds. Now, what I mean by that is, excuse me. What I mean by that is that so many times I've heard young adults who've grown up here to immigrant parents, and they'll come to my practice, my private practice, and I'll start talking to them. Here they are, 23, 24 years old, and I'll ask them about their faith. And they'll say to me, well, I don't see myself as Muslim, I see myself as more spiritual. Think about that for a minute. As if the two are on total opposite ends of the spectrum. That in order for me to be Muslim, I can't be spiritual at all. Or if I'm spiritual, that means I'm not Muslim, because Islam's all about rules. And it's all about the things you have to do, otherwise you're, going to Jahannam. Right? And so, last year at the convention, I talked a little bit about how we message to our kids that either you're going to be a good Muslim or a bad Muslim. Choose. And guess what? So if I'm not going to have a beard at the age of 21 and, wear my proper Muslim garb, then therefore I'm just going to be a bad Muslim and go clubbing and do all those other things that bad Muslims do. And my whole contention is that every one of us as parents is just trying to do our best. Islam is not easy in this country, and we're all struggling to be on the straight path, but it's more than just rules. So when we talk about our concerns about sexuality, whether it be homosexuality or teen pregnancy, we're talking about the absence of sexual morality that exists in this culture. It's almost as if kids are told by their peers and by television and all these other things that, it's your right to experiment in that regard. And if we're not having conversations about these things with our kids, then they will think that that's indeed the case. The classic example would be marijuana, where unfortunately a large part of our community, when they go to college, a lot of the boys especially, I get a lot of Muslim kids from the public school coming back to me and telling me, Mr. Royal, listen to this. You wouldn't believe how many Muslim guys smoke marijuana and weed in college. I'm like, really? Like, yeah, And my first exposure, one of my first clients in the Muslim community was a Hafiz of the Quran, where him and his friends would get together, all Hafiz, smoking weed after school. So that's what happens when you just act like Islam's a bunch of rules, because you never gave them a rule about marijuana, you see? So their internal compass about what's right and wrong is thrown off. So talking to them about, for example, marijuana, going in here and explaining to them the lies they're going to be told by people who use in society, like it's not addictive. 60% of kids in drug and alcohol treatment facilities in the United States are treated for marijuana addiction. See, but they don't know that, and their friends who smoke weed aren't going to tell them that, right? Also that it's all natural. It's just a plant. It can't hurt you. Well, there's like 1,000 things out there, probably more, that you could smoke that are all natural that will kill you. So it growing doesn't mean that it's good for you or not bad for you. And so there's all these other things that we need to educate ourselves as parents to help our kids understand that these things are harmful for you and they will affect you in the long run. There's all kinds of research out there now about marijuana and the increased likelihood, something like, I'm not giving a stat because I can't remember exactly, but mental illness as an adult as a result of the use of marijuana increases your likelihood by like 50%. I'm pretty sure that's a number. Whether it's depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, these are very serious things that are very serious problems in our community, in the American community. So we can't let the community raise our children anymore like a lot of our parents did, because, and I'll give you a short story. My cousin, who's a Chicago police officer, he's not Muslim. But I was talking with him about this one day, and he was like, because he talks about all the issues that he sees in the inner city in Chicago. And he said, yeah, I know. He said, because one time I was at my wife's best friend's house, and we were all playing this game. It's called Apples to Apples, I've never heard of it. But they're playing this game, this card game, and his daughter, who was was holding onto his leg, and all of a sudden she let go. And then he turned, and he said, where'd she go? And he turns to his wife's friend's husband and says, do you see my daughter Mia? Where did she go? And he goes, I'm not her damn dad. I don't know where she went. And that's an example of American society and how it's viewing. He said he got so angry he wanted to just like go after this guy, like, what's wrong with you? But about how it views other people's children. You know, I remember when I was growing up, I could very easily get spanked by my next door neighbor, and my parents wouldn't have minded it at all. You know, a lot of these teenagers are laughing like, what? It's serious. I mean, that wasn't that long ago, I like to think. So it's not like that anymore. And so we can't rely on the community to look out, like when our kids go outside, to look out for our son or daughter, that they're going to be doing the right thing. Because I think even in Muslim countries, that's not even the case anymore. People kind of are starting to keep to themselves. One of the things I like to say is that 50 years ago, the porches were all built in front of the houses. And then 30 years later, they started building all the porches in the back of their houses surrounded by big fences. Those are called decks, right? They build their decks in the back of the house because everybody's just kind of wanting to stay in their own little world. Now, one of the things I'll ask teenage youth is, who's your role model? And I did this at a Muslim school recently, and kids raised their hand. They gave all the cliche answers: the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, my mother, my brother, my sister, all these names. And then I said, okay, how much time do you spend with them in a week? How much time do you pray on the Prophet? How much time do you read about him, study his character, peace be upon him? And usually it's probably like, if you average it in a month, maybe 10 minutes a week or something like that. And I'll say, okay, now let's talk about some of the pop culture icons that you guys, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but I flashed a picture of somebody up on the screen. I said, who knows who that is? And 95% of the 150 kids knew who this person was. And I said, raise your hand if he is on your iPod at this moment, if you have him in your database or whatever you call that, your playlist, there you go. And again, about 80% of them had their hand raised. It was Lil Wayne. Now raise your hand as parents if you know who that is. Okay, well, you should know who that is because he's the most popular artist out there right now. But if you listen to his lyrics, they're horrible. They're absolutely horrible. I mean, they're degrading in every way to women. And this is a guy that's become the most popular artist in American culture, and our kids are listening to them every day. Every day just about. Think about it. I have a teenager. She's on her iPod every day. She doesn't have him on there. But kids have them on, screen every single song they listen to. But what I'm telling you is that you need to be conscious of what they're exposed to. Television, you can't put on a single program in the afternoon anymore without, late afternoon, evening programming, and regular television without swearing, going out with some kind of sexual message. Girls are being sent this message, that your sexuality is going to determine your self-worth. That's the message that media sends them everywhere. And that's why there's that pressure to dress a certain way, because if guys don't notice me, then I'm not worth much. They're not doing it consciously. It's not like they say, this is my intention, but we need to help them be aware that boys are sent the message that your happiness is going to be based on how many girls you can get, how much money you can make, and how athletic you are. That's the myth that boys are sent. And there was actually a research recently on the NFL, and they talked about how rampant depression is in the NFL. And part of the reason why is because these men hit this pinnacle of what they think it means to be a man. Here they are, like huge, muscle-bound guys, and they made it financially, because in order to be an NFL, you make at least $275,000 a year. That's just to be on the practice team, not even playing. And they get a lot of attention from the women, so you think that they're perfectly happy, but they're not. They're actually very depressed. So one of the things that I would suggest is that the very things that we use to occupy our children, because we either are too tired or we have our priorities mixed up, are the same things that affect who they become, and then we complain about it. And that would be like, for example, letting them occupy the internet with television, with video games. One of the things about video games, one of the things about video games is that obviously boys are much more prone to being addicted to video games than girls. And girls, you have more of the social networking sites that they can have trouble being addicted to. But the problem with media now is that kids could email or text, play video games, be on Facebook, and all these things at the same time, right? Do any parents know this? There's like a way to communicate with other people. Oh, there it is. You could talk with them, you could instant message, and you can play a video game at the same time with friends from all across the world. And we used to teach our kids stranger danger when we were growing up, parents taught that stuff to us. Well, now it all happens on the internet, and it's not necessarily stranger, like somebody's going to prey on them. That does happen. But it's also their peers are much bolder on the internet. I'll get teenage boys, come to me in my office at the high school saying, "Mr. Roy, you never guess what these girls will text to me." And I could guess because I've heard it a bunch of times. And that's where we need to monitor those things, because all these things, our kids begging us for an iPhone, we give them that iPhone, and then they're using that to access all these things and talk to all these people unlimited. It's just dangerous territory, and we need to rethink that. The other thing that I wanted to kind of close with is when I talk about my office, I work as a marriage counselor primarily with the Muslim community, and then I work full-time in a high school with teenagers. So I get to see kind of what this develops into as young married couples. And what you have is these concepts filtering into marriage. So let's say, for example, in pornography, I work with Muslims across the country sometimes through telephone and the computer, internet, trying to, men having an issue with pornography, thinking that, they had this misconception that once they got married, they'd stop. That I only use it now because I'm not married, but once I get married, I'll stop. Well, guess what, folks? It's not the case. It's an addiction. You can't. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. And you're exposing yourself to something that is changing your brain chemistry. The brain imagery now is showing that things like that, like pornography, is a real addiction. Video games too, to a certain extent, and all these other things that kids want to expose themselves, and you want to take the chance to let your teenager expose himself to at a young age, that it changes their brain chemistry. It actually changes the way their brain develops. And I mentioned in my last presentation that they're saying now the brain development isn't complete until about the age of 25. You know, some people even go as far as 30. I don't believe, maybe some of us men it takes that long, but generally speaking, it's about the age of 25, a little bit earlier for women, 23. So exposing yourself to those things at that time has a significant impact on your long-term development and your ability to relate to other people. And so we need to be conscious of these things, and one of the ways that we address this head on is educating yourself so that you can protect your kids. You know, one of the things that stuck in my head a long time ago, and I'll kind of close with this, Sheikh Hamza was talking at an MAS-ICNA Convention, and he said, you know, how do you fight an enemy you can't see? And he was talking about the shaitan. He says you take on someone as your ally who can see him. And he's talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when it comes to these things that you're fighting against, that they can't even see them coming, you need to educate yourself so that you could see it for them and fight the good fight. And what I mean by that is they're not going to like it, but inshallah, it's like a lot of things, like you teach them to eat their vegetables when they're younger. You know what's better for them in the long run, and inshallah, may Allah guide us all and help us be the best parents. Amen. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Edmund. I have, before our next speaker, a few announcements. You all should receive evaluation forms. So please, you know, we request you to fill out the evaluation forms that you may have, and inshallah that will help in organizing future conferences. And we'll try to have about 10 or 15 minutes for questions. So write down your questions, and it would be better if we have volunteers on the sides and hand them the questions. So inshallah that will save time. The third announcement is that please do visit Bazaar. As you know, that many of these vendors, they come long distance and they support these conventions and conferences. So we request our Muslim community to support these vendors. And the last thing, which is, you know, I'm sure all of you would be interested. You probably received small tickets, and we have a glass full of these tickets on the table. And the purpose is that after, inshallah, we are done, and before you leave, we will do drawings, and we will ask our speakers to pick 3 tickets from each. And I have some vouchers, some, you know, Bazaar coupons that you could use, $10, and some coupons that we have. So inshallah, we will do this drawing afterwards. One of the advice that once a very good friend of mine gave, especially when it comes to raising children, and when children start using computers and emails and have their own Facebook accounts, and he said, you know, one thing that parents must all do is share your passwords. That would mean that as parents, we also tell our kids, this is my password, this is my email address, you know, you can go and see my emails or check my Facebook account. And the same thing goes with the kids. So in a family, if you develop this, make this decision, that as families, we'll share our email accounts, we'll share our password, there's nothing secret in the family. And I think this is one of the beautiful advice that I got. It certainly helps, you know, opening up communication with the children, and also, you know, being very open, what is my email address. It also helps sometimes when you call home, you know, talk to your son or daughter that, can you please check this email from my work? You know, I need some information from my email. So this is, and the second thing that, as parents, sometimes we are guilty of this, and this is seen in our community a lot, that we sometimes have different standards when it comes to sons and different standards when it comes to daughters. And that is something that all parents must ask this, that do we have same moral standards that we have for our sons and for our daughters. Our next speaker, very dear friend of mine, good brother, Sheikh Hamid al-Ghazali, inshallah will talk about the prophets, and his topic is the prophets have been sent to fix the evils of their communities, an integral part of their societies. We can't separate ourselves from ills of our society, that American society. We should have a positive role, otherwise evil will invade us from the inside. Brother Hamid Al-Ghazali is a professor of Tarbiyah and Education with the Islamic American University. Dr. Ghazali has extensive experience in the field of Tarbiyah and issues related to in-classroom management. He holds a PhD from the Department of Curriculum and Instruction at Kansas State University. Dr. Ghazali worked as a principal and superintendent of several Islamic schools, and I invite Dr. Hamid Al-Ghazali for his talk.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا يا كريم. I want to thank you all for your time, for coming to listen to us. I really enjoyed the presentation made by Brother Edmund, and I took notes of some good things that I heard, and I think I'm going to learn from it. I'm sure you do the same, and I'm sure if we listen to you, I'll learn much more than I present to you. I come to you as a parent, number one, who raised 5 children, all of them born here, alhamdulillah. 3 of them graduated from college, and 2 are still in college. So I understand very well the issues and the dimension of the problems that we are facing. And I would like to share with you a few thoughts about that, based on my experience as a parent, based on my experience of an Islamic school, based on my experience as a teacher as well, who listens to students a lot. The first time I came to really encounter some of the issues that we have here I wasn't really that much connected with the American society and the American lives and so on. And then one of the parents came in and told me, he said, I want to talk to you in private. I said, okay, please come. And I expected that there will be a problem about, some of the issues that his daughter is facing and so on. And then he told me, surprised and shocked, said, my daughter has a crush on your son. I said, that's the last thing I expect. My daughter has a crush on my son. Which son? I said, I really don't recall that I have children that old at the time, and that your daughter would have a crush on my son. And then he said my son's name. I said, my God, you know what? Which grade is my son in? My son is in 6th grade. So I was shocked. I said, how old is your daughter? Which grade is she in? I said, she's in 4th grade. That was a shock. I couldn't believe it, but it was real. I was real, and I was really out of touch with reality. But that gave me shock therapy, and I started to see things differently. And one of the camps that we did, we used to do a lot of camps for children, and I think camps are one of the most important tools that really help the children grow in a healthy way. And all my children, camps that we did. So in one of the camps, I was one of the speakers, and I had all the children from, upper elementary, middle school. So I asked, how many of you have seen drugs? And I expected that a good number of them would raise their hands. But I was shocked. Almost everybody was raising his hands, or their hands, both males and females. I was really shocked. I said, did you know that myself, as old as I am right now, I have never seen drugs in my life? They couldn't believe it, but I have not seen it up till today, believe it or not. I have not seen it with my own eyes. Maybe I've seen it on TV and this. And this applies to most of the parents here, if not all the parents. But that's the reality, the generation gap that we have. A parent like myself who never seen drugs in his life, and children who have maybe experienced it, lived it, and have seen the problems with it. So it's a real problem. It's in our own backyard. my son was telling me, this yesterday or the day before yesterday, you know this person, my friend, you know him? I said, I'm trying to remember which one. And then he reminded me. And then he said, he got shot. And his funeral, the janazah was this Friday. He said, oh, I remember I received an email and yeah, I wasn't aware that this is the person. He said he was overdosed. I got shot. That's a reality that we live in. That's one of our own children. That's one of our own children. 2 months ago, same thing happened. Overdosed, and then something happened. These are our own children. Our own Muslims who are born here, raised here, went to Islamic schools and went to the masjids and lived in the masjids. We cannot really separate our lives from the problems that our children face and the community around us, Muslims and non-Muslims, face. It becomes very important for us to realize that this is reality, and we as parents, I think I liked very much what my dear brother Edmund said. I can say the same thing that you said to your children, but it would be the first time for them to hear it. And I admit, this is the reality. And I think it's very important that we develop strategies and we acknowledge this fact in our lives as parents. Just a few weeks ago, I had an argument with my own son, and I developed a strategy. Said, okay, this is what I'm telling you. I want to go and tell your sister exactly the same thing that I said to you, and she'll explain it to you. Why? Because she's going to explain it to him very well. I can't explain it to you as she is going to do. And I want you to share, I want to share with you something about that. That we live together and work together as a family. That's a very important part. When we have a problem, we don't take it outside the family. It's not a perfect family, but this procedure is very healthy. Because the 5 kids that I have, they understand each other very well. They can talk to each other. They can communicate with each other much better than myself. Then when I face a problem, I said, okay, go and talk to your sister talk to, or your brother. And the 5 of them talk among each other as a family members and communicate with me, and we all communicate, becomes much healthier. And I would like every young boy or girl here, every young man to do the same, every parent to do the same. I think it was a very important experience that I have seen. I was shocked also. I went to one of the Islamic schools that I supervised, and actually it was in Tulsa, and then I asked the students there, a survey passed to them, middle and high school students, and I said, who's your role model in the school? I'm asking about who's your role model in the school, who's the person that you like the most and you want to follow? And many of them mentioned the principal, many of them mentioned other teachers, and I was shocked that some of them mentioned a student or 2 students from among them. From among them, they chose them as their role model. So I was surprised. Who are those students? And I said, I'm sure they can communicate and do us a service much better than the principal or any of the teachers. And that student, of course, was one of the students who was memorizing the Quran, was an A student, was this. But at the same time, he was communicating with them and talking to them, talking the same language. So I think we still can see good models among them. Let me share with you a few thoughts here about what we think here from an Islamic perspective. I would like to share with you from that prophet mentality. 2 examples are given in the Quran of prophets who had family members with some social ills. And we have a message here that maybe you are so good, but still you cannot dissociate yourself and separate yourself from the ills in the society around you. And here is an example, Nuh and his son. And we read in the Quran about Nuh and his son and Lut and his wife. وَنَادَى نُوحٌ رَبَّهُ قَالَ رَبِّ إِنَّ بَنِي مِنْ أَهْلِي وَإِنَّ وَعْدَكَ الْحَقَّ وَأَنْتَ أَحْكَمُ الْحَاكِمِينَ قال يا نوح إنه ليس من أهلك إنه عمل غير صالح فلا تسألني ما ليس لك به علم إني أعظك أن تكون من الجاهلين. He said, Noah alayhi salam called upon his Lord and he said, my son is from me and you are the one who are wise and you are the one who sets the rules. And Allah said to him, no, he's not your own son, though he was from his own blood. But there was something that made him different, kafir, and lost the way and so on. So we cannot dissociate ourselves, and maybe you are the best, that your children will, in a way or another, will not be, or your friend will not be. But this is not the end. We got to walk with them until they reach the safe shore. ضرب الله مثلا للذين كفروا امرأ وامرأة لوط كانتا تحت عبدين من عبادنا صالحين فخانتاهما. In Surah At-Tahrim we read example of prophets who had their wives not really acting according to they should be. And that's again another example. We read in the Quran that do not really think of yourself as, oh, I'm good, I'm the best. I don't have any problem. My children don't have any problem. No. You should say, Alhamdulillah, if this is the case. And you should admit that you're not infallible. That things could happen. And that in a minute or another, things can change. And Allah told the Muslims in Surah An-Nisa here, كَذَلِكَ كُنْتُم مِّن قَبَلُ فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ فَتَبَيَّنُوا. You were like this before. So think before you come to jump to a conclusion, or I'm better, or this person is no good, Muslim or non-Muslim. Come to talking about non-Muslims. Come and think and say, oh, you were like them before and Allah blessed you. So you better really wake up and do the right thing before it's too late. And we read in Surah Al-Hajj, at the end, the verse before the last in Surah Al-Hajj, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا ارْكَعُوا وَاسْجُدُوا وَاعْبُدُوا رَبَّكُمْ وَافْعَلُوا الْخَيْرَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. O you who believe, make ruku', make sujood, worship your Lord, and do the good so that you may succeed. And do the good here really includes every good thing. For Muslims, for non-Muslims, for plants, for animals, it does not put any restriction. And I want to remind you, Hajj, Surah Al-Hajj, the word Hajj reminds us with something very important in Islam, which is ibadah. And Hajj is the symbol of ibadah. So when you look at this verse in Surah Al-Hajj, it gives you the comprehensive nature of Islam, comprehensive nature of ibadah. Anything you do is ibadah. As long as it's for the sake of Allah, as long as it's pure, as long as you put your heart into it and you mention the name of Allah, or you kind of Islamize it, then it is ibadah. And we read the verse for this conference, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ. Help one another in righteousness, and do not cooperate or help one another in evil things. When the Prophet ﷺ was at a very difficult time, was in the peak of suffering in Mecca. And you can think of all different sufferings that the Muslims had. But when you think about the peak, when he lost his wife, when he lost his uncle, when everything around him was gone, Allah sent him Surah Hud. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ni Hudun wa akhawata." Hud and his sisters, the other surahs that came with it, made the gray hair appear in my head. And at the end of the surah, Allah sent to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ conclusions. And I'm going to quote a few verses from the surah that relate to our topic today. And at the end of the concluding remarks of the surah, Allah told Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, فَلَوْلَا كَانَ مِنَ الْقُرُونِ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ أُولُو بَقِيَّةٍ يَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْفَسَادِ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِمَّنْ أَنْجَيْنَا مِنْهُمْ. If there were to be a few among you who stopped corruption, who stopped evil, Allah would have saved the towns. Very interesting, because we really talking about here about not ordaining the good and forbidding the evil, only forbidding the evil. And that's very interesting. You all ordaining the good, forbidding the evil, come together. But in this surah here, it's coming at the peak of suffering, and it's telling Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his companions about stopping or helping to stop the evil and the corruption and the bad things that are going on. And look into the verse that came immediately after that. Allah said, وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ لِيُهْلِكَ الْقُرَى بِظُلْمٍ وَأَهْلُهَا مُصْلِحُونَ. Allah would not destroy the towns where its people are muslihun. Is it salihun or muslihun? Muslihun, not salihun. It's not good enough that you are salih. You have to go beyond that, and you have to ordain the good and help people come out of the problems they have. And that's the nature of Islam. People who are muslihun, and it becomes very important for us to do that. Allah also sent to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam the example of Yusuf alayhi salam. Example of Yusuf during that time. In the Quran you have, two groups of verses that come one after the other in the same order that they were revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And just to keep it in your mind, they are the ones that start with Alif Lam Ra, and they are the ones that start with Hamim. So the group of Hamim and the group of Alif Lam Ra, with a little bit of exception. So Alif Lam Ra in Surah Yusuf alayhi salam, Allah sent it to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? Because at that time, the Muslims are angry, are mad at the unbelievers at them. They are torturing them. They are doing this for them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling him, be like Yusuf, forgive. Go ahead and help build the city. Go ahead and help build the economy. Go ahead and help bring success to the city, as Yusuf alayhi salam did. And that's a very important message for us, to walk and extend our hands and cooperate with non-Muslims in fighting all diseases and problems in the community. It becomes also important for us to learn from, I just want to bring to your attention this example here. We don't want to be living in a shell like this, closed shell, where we just isolate ourselves and we don't want to deal with problems, as some parents want to do. Nor do you want your children and yourself to dissociate and lose your identity and follow a no-boundary model. You just want to assimilate in the community. Indeed, you want to be in the middle. That middle position that I have over here in this slide here, over here, it becomes an important model for us to really look at this model. The one that comes here in the middle becomes an important one, where we allow ourselves to interact, allow others to come, work with them hand in hand to really find solutions to the problems that we face. And I think that's very important, and it's very important to remember that's the way Islam spread in the world, and the way Islam went into different parts in the world at the time, through that interaction. And that's what we need to do. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Ibrahim, Allah saved Ibrahim at the end in Surah Al-Anbiya, saved Ibrahim alayhi salam. He said, وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ وَلُوطًا إِلَى الْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. After Allah said that Allah saved him and made the fire safe for him, Allah saved him and Lut to the other city where Lut and Ibrahim alayhi salam were saved and went to continue their message. But Lut somehow got stuck, got problems. Did he leave and said, well, I'm not going to deal with those people are ill and I'm not going to take it? And notice that next to him was Ibrahim alayhi salam, just a few steps from him. He could have went to him, but he chose wisely to stay and walk with them and help them until the last minute. Actually, until the last minute. Look at this. Until the angels came to him and said to them, قَالَ لَوْ أَنَّ لِي بِكُمْ قُوَّةً أَوْ آوِي إِلَىٰ رُكْنٍ شَدِيدٍ. Oh, I wish I have power to save you. The angels were coming at the last minute. And I wish I find support, bigger support than I have. And then they said to him, قَالُوا يَا لُوطُ إِنَّا رُسُلُ رَبِّكَ. We are the messengers of Allah. لَن يَصِلُوا إِلَيْكَ. They'll never reach you. فَأَسْرِ بِأَهْلِكَ بِقِطْعٍ مِّنَ اللَّيْلِ. Look and take your family and leave. You'll be saved except your wife. My point here is, until the last minute, he was working with his own people. Not only that, but he was also solutions, not isolating himself. He was telling them, look at all these daughters that you have. Look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for you wives from among you. Go into that. So this is an example of the many ways that he was helping his people there. Did not dissociate himself, did not isolate himself, and that's a very important point. And finally, I would like to share with you an important element here in dealing with these social ills. Our attitude. It's a very important part. And our attitude towards the one who has a problem should be caring, should be loving, should be somebody who really finds solutions, warmth, love, care. That's what we have to offer. If we don't offer that, they'll become more lost. And they'll become, they'll go to somebody else for help. Look into Ibrahim alayhi salam. When the angels came to destroy the town of Lut, what Ibrahim did? Ibrahim was arguing with the angels not to destroy them, to give them more chance, save them, don't destroy them. And the angels were telling him, وَجَاءَتْهُ الْبُشْرَى يُجَادِلُنَا فِي قَوْمِ لُوط. He was arguing. And the angels said to him, يَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ أَعْرِضْ عَنْ هَذَا إِنَّهُ قَدْ جَاءَ أَمْرُ رَبِّكَ وَإِنَّهُمْ آتِيهُمْ عَذَابٌ غَيْرُ مَرْدُودٌ. Oh Ibrahim, stop this. Stop this. Turn away from this. The matter is decided, and they'll suffer. The torment is coming from the Lord. But yet he was still arguing. And in the other verse, and this was in Surah Hud, and the other verse in Surah Al-Ankabut, as a last resort, he said, guys, yeah, Lot is there. He's trying to delay the matter, trying to give them, and we know that Lot is there. Don't tell us what we know and what we shouldn't know. In other words, this is the way they were talking to him. And قال إن فيها لوطا قالوا نحن أعلم بمن فيها. We know who's there. We'll save him and his family, except his wife. So it's very interesting and very important for us to have the right attitude, and I know you passing this to me, so I will stop at this point, and maybe inshallah if we have time I'll share with you more important slides about the child's need, about the young people need, and where these needs are there and how we satisfy these needs inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I have a couple. Okay.
Brothers and sisters, we received a lot of questions, and honestly, we have only 12 or 13 minutes, and I think the number of questions we have require about an hour, more for this session. So that is one of the things that you can write in your evaluation, that such a topic should be given more time, inshallah, in future. And in these few minutes, so Brother Edmund has a lot of questions, especially about issues related with teenagers and all those issues. And then there are some questions which I would request Brother Hamid. So we'll start with Brother Edmund.
I tried organizing this into related topics. One of the three of the questions were regarding censorship of emails, and the general rule is this: that we have to be vigilant. And sure, like drinking and driving, the police are vigilant about it. There's still going to be people that drink and drive, but it's severely dangerous. So we have to keep they have to keep putting their efforts in that area. It's the same thing with our kids, but there has to be, you have to work on the trust with them as well. And that you can. This is the first I've heard of parents sharing email with their kids. I'm not sure about that. I mean, that's something that maybe some people have tried. If you have any experience with that, I'd be interested to hear. But as far as just because some topics or some things that you might get an email aren't appropriate, it's not always open book. The open book doesn't always go both ways until they get to be an adult. I was telling someone earlier that these chairs they feel like they're broken. Every time you sit on them, they flex, they move a lot more than your normal chairs, so they can be deceiving. So So when it comes to censorship of email, I think that whenever you allow your child to use a new device, whether it's a cell phone or email, you set up very clear rules and boundaries from the beginning, because if you try to do it later on, then that's when they get upset. It's like that with any expectations. You set up those expectations at the beginning, and then there's consequences if they hurt your trust. But it's not like you're checking in on your kid every day to see what emails they're exchanging. The other topic was addiction in general, and people concerned about that, whether it's video games or pornography or drugs. And one of the things that I'd like to say about that is that we need to get out of the mentality that you got to find a Muslim to treat your kids, for two reasons. One, we just don't have enough people out there right now, and treatment for your child is better. The thing is that the number one treatment program out there for drugs and alcohol is AA. And if you know anything about AA, the basic premise of AA is Tawheed, is that you have to, first thing you have to do is admit that there's a being higher than yourself. Now they have to say it like that because they're trying to not be religious specific, but I just think that's amazing that the number one most productive treatment program for addictions is bringing people back to submission. And that's the first, I think, 3 steps are based on that. So regardless of whether it's a Muslim counselor or a non-Muslim counselor, you need to get your child help for that. If your child is dropping out of college or anything else, because of these habits, then you need to get help for them. I'm going to pass the mic to brother here, but one thing I'd like to say, I did receive one letter from a Muslim recent convert. I'll speak with them afterwards if she wants to come up. I'm not going to address the group with that one. But then also, I'm going to give my email address, because I don't know how much time we have today. I have to speak immediately 15 minutes after this, and they texted me and said to come early. So it's Edmund, EDMUND, at Heartspeak, HEARTSPEAK.org. Edmund at heartspeak.org. Edmund with a U, EDMUND.
Brother Hamid pulled the old school trick on me. Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm sure we have insurance, right? One of the questions that I have here is saying something like, my child flip-flops. You know, sometimes he's good, sometimes he's not, sometimes in a good mood, sometimes not in a good mood. What should I do? Another question is, I've been here over, or a parent has been here over 20 years. The other parent has recently moved to here. There is a conflict between the way both parents are dealing with children. What do we recommend? How do we solve this conflict? And I want to share with you a very important part here from educational psychology and development, and from the application of it to Islam. And I want to share with you this chart that we have here. In this chart we see the Muslims, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ took the Muslims from point 1 and climbed the mountain with them until they reached point 2. So they were really in a stage where the Prophet ﷺ was kind of working with them step by step until they reached the peak. And over here, this is the years, number of years in Mecca, and then number of years in Medina. And the Prophet ﷺ was going step by step, until the Muslims reached the peak. Here, at the curve then, these are the steps, and these are the years, and this is the commitment to Islam. He helped them grow, and this will be the curve that everybody should go through. And if you look at this curve now, I remove this, where is the most critical age here in this curve? Where you are constantly changing. You want to change. You want to do this today, you don't want to do it tomorrow. My son came to me and said, oh, Daddy, I want to get a haircut. Okay, good. You don't need a haircut. You don't even have any hair. Well, it doesn't look nice. I want to get a haircut. Okay, go ahead, get a haircut. The next week he comes to me, I want to grow an afro. Doesn't make sense. From no hair to, all the hair in the world. But this is the nature. We kind of, want to change from one mode to another mode. And that happens the most in the age between 13 and 20. So if it happens that you are in this age, you really need a lot of help. because your ability to judge is hampered by the hormones, by the development that you're going through, and you really need somebody to help you. Whether that person is your parent, whether that person is your friend, whether that parent is a counselor, it doesn't matter. You do need somebody to help you make the right decision. And that's what I recommend. Number one is your parent. And number one, on the side, the parent should keep that curve in mind and work with his or her children so that they grow and understand that, you know, one of the things my children told me, or they keep telling me, Daddy, you don't understand. It's true, I don't understand. Maybe I do, I disagree, you know. But I think that the magnitude and the pressure they go through, maybe it's not within our understanding. And that's where the parent to realize. One parent forced his child to wear the niqab. A few months later, she took off the niqab. A few months later, she took off the hijab. A few months later, she started not wearing the hijab. A few months later, with the pressure on her, she left the whole house. You see, that's a serious problem. So you better live with a modest hijab or a modest dress that is not perfect than to have somebody who's leaving the house or going with somebody else or going with the neighbor. I think that is very important, and that's very wise. And here an important concept that comes to us, and I'll conclude with that, the concept of wisdom versus being smart. You could be a smart parent, you could be a smart person, but you lack a lot of wisdom. You could be the most, intelligent person who can design a whole city, but you may sometimes don't have any wisdom. And for children, you might be smartest person, but you need a lot of wisdom. And who got this wisdom? Perhaps your parent has a lot of wisdom, and I'm sure they do, with the experience they have, a lot of wisdom. And through this wisdom, with you being smart and your parent being wise, I think it's a good combination. Make good use of it.
Yes, our time is up, and we've been informed that inshallah Salatul Asr for our local brothers and sisters will be soon, inshallah. But as I announced before, you have probably red tickets in your hand, and we will do a drawing. And I'll ask Brother Edmund to take out 3.
These 3 are here.
Okay. Okay. No, let's keep. I have coupon number 616131. So check your coupons. We'll do it quickly. 616131. 615990. 615990. Oh, okay, a sister has won it. Thank you, sisters. 616131, we're still waiting, and 616130. 616130, oh, okay, mashallah. We have another winner. Okay, and this, okay. Okay, now we have the numbers picked by Brother Hamid. 616176. 616176. Oh, mashallah, front row. Congratulations. Okay, 615982. 615982. Okay, another sister. Sisters are just all sisters. Mashallah. Thanks. Okay, and 616163. We have 2 more. Okay, we can have 2 more. 6163. All right, we have a brother, young brother winning here. Okay, Brother Hamid, 2 more. 615998. 615998. Okay, another brother, mashallah. And one last one. 616123. Anyone with 616123? All right. Alhamdulillah, we got all of brothers and sisters. They won. Jazakallahu khair. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu alayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.